The Dark Crystal is a beloved children's movie from the 1980s. Today, Netflix has released The Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. 30 years between the two have only made this property look better. It's hard to say just how much a kind of dark fantasy movie meant to kids growing up in the 80s. This was a time all the kids' movies were dark. You had Monster Squad, Goonies, all these kinds of films where you had young kids, there were evil menaces. And one of the strangest was The Dark Crystal. Now, this was a movie by Jim Henson, completely puppets. Yeah, the Muppet guy, Jim Henson. A whole puppeted movie with a world that really seemed expansive, fantasy, sort of like you could get into the Star Wars universe. Now, unfortunately, The Dark Crystal only had the one movie. I don't think it did that well, but it's something everybody saw on either cable or on VHS, back when that was a thing. For some reason, someone at Netflix thought it was a brilliant idea to bring this back. And they were right. I have to tell you, from watching the first one, the puppetry is better. The set design is at least on the same level, if not better. This TV series, episode 1 at least, has far more expansive design. Back in the original Dark Crystal movie, we really only saw a small village where we had gelflings. We had a couple exterior scenes. The world was all desert. And then we had inside the castle around the Dark Crystal. Now it's much more expansive. We'll get into spoilers a little later. Now we'll just do a little background. You start off in a world. I'm not quite sure how long they said it was. It was hundreds or maybe 1,000 years before the events of the original Dark Crystal movie, which saw the end of the Skekis and their threat on Thra, which is the planet. We start off, we have the original castle, although the castle looks like it does at the end of the Dark Crystal, where everything is green and lush. Still ruled by Skekis. But we have gelflings serving the Skeksis. The Skeksis have become the lords of the planet. There was Aughra, who was the crone, if you remember from the first movie. She was the guardian of the crystal, and the Skeksis basically tricked her by talking about secrets from the stars. And these secrets were so compelling to Aughra that the Skeksis built her sort of a planetarium telescopy thing, and that's where Aughra spends the rest of her days. Now, we did see this in the original movie, but now we understand where it came from. So in addition to the castle, we have, they talk about several gelfling kingdoms, but we're focusing on two. One is sort of in the mountains, forest type area, and another one is in caves underground, which almost makes me think of Fraggle Rock for those who are old enough to remember that show. And they start this story where things start to go wrong, at least wrong for the gelflings. What we have is the Skeksis rely on the Dark Crystal to supply them with life. And the crystal gets its power from the world, Thra. For some reason, the crystal no longer gives them life-sustaining abilities. And the Skeksis are very concerned, and they're looking for a new source of energy to give themselves immortality. It's very interesting that they have immortality in this series, because if you look through the history of the world, so many horrible things were done in the name of finding immortality. You can look to China and find all the Taoist elixirs that ended up killing people because they were poisonous. You have Balboa coming to the New World, murdering all sorts of natives to get to the Fountain of Eternal Youth. And so to bring sort of our world themes into this, I think is a nice touch. It's something not a lot of stories and these fantasy series really think through. It's just, oh, the bad guys want power. For what? For the sake of being powerful? I don't know. For me, there needs to be a little more behind it. And this is an excellent addition. So we meet a cast of new characters. We have Rian, who is a castle guard in the castle that's for the Dark Crystal. We have Mira, who is a female guard and Rian's best buddy. And she really likes him. Rian is sort of a goof, and they're both goofballs together. And they have sort of, I don't know if you call it gelfling intercourse, but there is a dreamlike state where gelflings could share each other's dreams. This is nothing new. It was in the movie in one little spot, but they really bring it back in this series as a way to share knowledge between people, but it also seems to be analogous for sex. So I'm wondering, as we go along, if we'll see that the age of the audience for this show is they're expecting to be a little older than the Dark Crystal. I think the Dark Crystal itself was pretty good for younger kids. The movie maybe targeted 8 to 10-year-olds, whereas I think this is going a little older. You probably get into more like a 13, 14-year-old. So they're being goofballs together, and there are certain animals which are kept in cages by Skekis, and gelflings are not allowed anywhere near these things. One breaks out. It's a spider-like creature, and they're on the hunt for it. Now, Rian's father is the captain of the guard, but he's got to take Skeksis to the gelfling capital in order to receive their tithes from the gelflings, because all the gelflings are ruled by the Skeksis. They all seem to worship the Skeksis. They think Skeksis are awesome dudes. It's like, all right. In that village, we have Bree, who is a princess. She is the youngest of the princesses, and she's a book nerd. She hangs out in the library. She wants to know everything. She talks about getting farts from certain roots that she read, and she thinks everybody's going to be into it. In the show, she meets the Skeksis, even though Skeksis almost never talk to any gelflings. And we start to see the Skeksis, not the sexies. The Skeksis are not sexies. We start to see their true colors. We have crops that fail, and some farmers, they have to tithe, but it's just pathetic. So instead, the Skeksis more or less demand that the gelfling farmers offer a family heirloom necklace, which they say is dream etched. So I wonder if that's going to be a thing where we see dreams being used to affect the real world in the future. So she gets disillusioned. She finds a book about the Skeksis and what seems to be about the crystal, which they call the Crystal of Life. And she somehow unleashes a book of knowledge to where it shows her a symbol, which we don't know, but I believe will be the symbol for the original crystal. Then we have yet another gelfling, Deet. She is one of the cave gelflings, and she's gathering this glowing gathers glowing moss, which she feeds to a bunch of cave-dwelling animals, sort of like creepy little cave worm type things, but they're good. They're good. They mention that there is the darkness, which it's turning these creatures mad. It's turning them insane. And she feeds one to a baby worm, and the baby worm bites her. And we know that the baby worm turns because the eyes go from blue to a magenta. Then we see the assumedly parent worm tries to bite her as well. She manages to escape, and she finds what they call the guardian tree. So this guardian tree, sort of like the tree in Avatar, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of like, when you watch this and you really do think of Avatar. But it's good. So this tree shows Deet all of the nonsense that's going on in the world, all of these plants and other things that are getting corrupted. And it tells her, oh, you've got to stop it. So you have to go to this kingdom in the mountains or in the forest where Bree's mother is the queen. And then the last major thing to happen is Rianne and Mira, the two guards, they're trying to find this spider thing, and Mira goes down into the catacombs where she is not supposed to be. And she stumbles on the laboratory of the scientist. So we saw the scientist laboratory in the original movie. It's where he will suck the life out of the podlings and the gelflings. And in his attempt to get the crystal to work, he's zapping it with a bunch of electricity. The crystal changes. It changes from a life-giving crystal to a life-taking crystal. So the scientist, he starts to have his life force sucked out, but he's saved by the Chamberlain. And the Chamberlain convinces the scientist that he can use the gelflings. All they have to do is take out the gelflings' life force. So Mira is sort of captured, and she's brought into the lab, and the scientist, he fires up his machine and sticks her in the back with these industrial strength hypodermic needles, I guess you'd say, which start to pump out her life essence. The essence gets put into a little bowl, and the Skeksis drink, and they feel invigorated and powerful. It's not quite as cool as the original movie, because in the movie, it showed like all these withered aging signs that are reversed by drinking the essence of others. Now, I suppose you could say, all right, well, this is at a time when the Skeksis are still healthy. They're not old yet, which I would say fair enough. So at the end, Mira disappears, and there's just one little bottle of her essence left. And during this whole time, Rian, he sort of followed after her. He was not captured. He saw from the grate where the gelfling in the original movie was watching. They haven't mentioned a shard of the crystal yet, so I'm not quite sure if that's broken off or what. But this version of Dark Crystal is amazing. Highly recommend episode 1. We'll see if Netflix can continue this. I'm not sure why this isn't on Disney Plus, since I believe Disney owns the Muppets and Henson Studio, but spot on. If this is the legacy of Jim Henson and the people who have come after him, I would say they've only improved with time. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the episodes. Hopefully, this will be a return to Netflix for fine TV movie making. So if you like this episode, please please subscribe. It really helps out the channel a lot. Definitely tell me what you think of Dark Crystal Age of Resistance episode 1. And we'll see you next time.